My name is Claire Thompson, and until the night everything collapsed, I believed I was the lucky one. I was 28, living in a quiet suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio, with a ring on my finger that still felt new. Ethan Reed had proposed 6 months earlier on the back porch of the house we were already calling ours. He got down on one knee under the string lights I'd hung myself, and for a few seconds the whole world went quiet except for the sound of my own heartbeat. When I said yes, he lifted me off the ground like the decision had made him lighter too. We set the wedding for early October. I wanted fall colors and soft candlelight. My sister, Ashley, was supposed to be my maid of honor. Ashley was 2 years older, sharper with people, quicker with a joke, the one who always knew how to walk into a room and own it. Growing up, I had been the quiet one who stayed after school to help the teacher clean up. Ashley was the one who got invited to every party. Our parents treated the difference like a natural law. Ashley was outgoing. I was steady. They said it with love, but the words still landed with weight. Till I loved her. We shared a bathroom. Growing up, we shared clothes, secrets, and late-night drives when one of us couldn't sleep. When Ethan and I got serious, Ashley was the first person I told. She cried with me on the phone. She helped me pick the dress. She sat through every tasting appointment and pretended the cake samples weren't making her nauseous. I thought we were close. 3 weeks before the wedding, Ethan started working later. He said the firm had a big case. I didn't question it. I was buried in seating charts and final payments. Ashley offered to take some of the load. She handled the florist when I was too exhausted to argue about hydrangeas. She calmed our mother when the guest list kept growing. She was everywhere I needed her to be. Looking back, that should have been the first warning. The night it broke open started like any other. I came home early because the bakery had closed for inventory, and I suddenly had 3 free hours. Ethan's car was in the driveway. Ashley's silver Civic was parked behind it. I remember the exact sound the front door made when I pushed it open. The soft click of the latch. Quiet that followed. They were in the living room. Ethan stood near the fireplace with his back to me. Ashley's hands were on his chest. Their faces were close enough that I couldn't see space between them. For one frozen second I thought I was interrupting a private conversation. Then Ethan's hand slid into her hair and he kissed her the way he used to kiss me when we first started dating, hungry, certain, like he'd been waiting all day for it. I must have made a sound. Something small. Both of them turned. Ethan's face went white. Ashley's stayed carefully blank for half a second too long, like she was deciding which version of the truth to offer. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just stood there with my keys still in my hand and watched the life I thought I was living dissolve in real time. Ethan spoke first. "Claire, don't." My voice came out steady. That surprised me more than anything. "Don't say my name like that." Ashley stepped back. She smoothed her blouse. Like this was a minor inconvenience. "We need to talk." I looked at her. Really looked. The same sister who had helped me choose the veil. The same sister who had laughed with me about mother of the bride dresses. Something cold settled behind my ribs. "How long?" I asked. Neither of them answered right away. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. "A few months." Ashley corrected him without looking at me. 4 months. While I was measuring tables and writing thank you notes and believing every soft word he said at night, I set my keys on the entry table with careful precision. Get out of my house. Ethan tried again. Claire, please. It's complicated. Get out. Ashley's eyes narrowed. You're overreacting. That was the moment the last thread of loyalty snapped. I walked past both of them, opened the front door, and waited. Ethan left first. Ashley lingered just long enough to say, "You'll understand." Eventually, before she walked out into the evening air like she still owned the right to speak to me. I locked the door behind them and sat on the floor of the living room until the light outside turned blue. Then I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and poured a glass of water I didn't drink. My hands were steady. My mind was not. The next morning I called my parents. My mother cried. My father went quiet in that heavy way he always did when the world disappointed him. They asked me to come over. I did. We sat in their kitchen while I told them everything. Ashley arrived 20 minutes later, eyes red, voice trembling, with a carefully constructed story about how she and Ethan had fallen for each other and how neither of them had meant to hurt me. My mother looked between us like she was trying to decide which daughter to protect. My father stared at the table. Ashley said, "Claire was never really happy with him. You know that." I stared at her. "You don't get to rewrite my life." She turned to our parents. "She's always been jealous of me. This is just more of the same." Something in my mother's face softened toward Ashley. I felt it like a physical shift in the room. The same pattern from childhood. Ashley needed protecting. Claire would be fine. Claire was the strong one. I left before I said something I couldn't take back. That night I stayed at a hotel. Canceled the venue the next morning. I returned the dress. I sent a single message to the bridal party explaining that the wedding was off and that I would not be discussing it further. Most of them replied with sympathy. A few stayed silent. I already knew which ones had been closer to Ashley than to me. Ethan tried to call. I blocked the number. Ashley sent long texts that started with apologies and ended with justifications. I blocked those too. 2 weeks passed in a kind of gray fog. I went to work. I came home to an apartment that still smelled like the candles Ethan and I had bought together. I stopped answering the phone when my mother's name appeared. Every conversation with her somehow circled back to how hard this must be for Ashley, how she was so torn, how I needed to try to understand. I stopped trying. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, something shifted. I was cleaning out the guest room closet. Ethan had left a box of old college papers and I wanted them gone when I found a manila envelope tucked behind a stack of textbooks. It wasn't labeled. I almost threw it away without opening it. Something made me slide the contents out. Instead, inside were printed emails, bank statements, and a single photograph. The photograph was of Ashley and a man I didn't recognize. They were standing outside a small clinic in another state. The date, stamped on the back, was 3 years old. The emails were between Ashley and someone named Dr. Elaine Marks. The language was careful, clinical, and devastating. I sat on the floor and read every page twice. By the time I finished, the gray fog had burned away. In its place was something colder and clearer. Ashley had been carrying a secret for years. A secret that would destroy the carefully polished image she showed the world. A secret that explained every strange disappearance, every sudden trip for the work, every time she had gone quiet when certain topics came up at family dinners. And now she was planning to marry Ethan in 6 weeks. I learned that detail the same day. A mutual Friend, someone who still felt loyal enough to warn me, sent a screenshot of an invitation. Simple cream cardstock. Ashley and Ethan's names side by side. A date in November. A venue I recognized because I had almost booked it myself. They hadn't waited. They hadn't even pretended to grieve what they had done. I stared at the screenshot until the words blurred. Then I folded the papers back into the envelope and placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk. I did not cry that night. I made a list instead. Not a list of angry messages or public confrontations. A list of quiet, precise steps. People who might still answer questions. Places where records could be confirmed. Timing that would matter. I slept better than I had in weeks. The next morning I called in sick to work and drove 2 hours north. Clinic in the photograph was still there, small and discreet, set back from the road behind a row of pine trees. I didn't go inside. I just sat in the parking lot and watched people come and go, confirming what the papers had already told me. On the drive back, I called a college friend who worked in human resources for a large hospital system. We hadn't spoken in over a year, but she answered on the second ring. I kept the conversation light at first. Then I asked a careful question. She went quiet for a long moment before she said, "I can't give you files, but I can tell you that if someone was looking in the right places, they would find what they needed." It was enough. Over the following days, I moved carefully. I did not confront Ashley. I did not warn Ethan. I let them plan their perfect wedding while I gathered every piece of the truth they thought was buried. My mother called again. This time I answered. "Claire, honey, Ashley is really struggling. She feels terrible about how things happened. Maybe if you two sat down." "I'm not interested in sitting down," I said. "She's your sister." She was. Silence stretched between us. Then my mother sighed the way she always did when she decided I was being difficult. "You're going to regret cutting her off like this." I almost laughed. "I don't think I will." I hung up before she could answer. That evening I sat at my kitchen table with the envelope open in front of me and the wedding invitation screenshot glowing on my phone. November 14th. A Saturday. 200 guests according to the mutual friend. Half of them would be people who had once congratulated me on my engagement. I ran my finger along the edge of the photograph. Ashley had taken the man I was going to marry. She had stood in my living room and told me I would understand eventually. She had rewritten the story so that I was the jealous one, the overreactor, the sister who couldn't let go. She thought the worst thing that could happen to me had already happened. She was wrong. I closed the envelope and locked it in the small fireproof box I kept under the bed. Then I opened my laptop and began drafting a letter I would never send, at least not in that form. It was practice. A way to shape the words until they were exact. The Ohio evening settled into early darkness. Somewhere across town, Ashley was probably choosing centerpieces or tasting cake with the man who had once looked at me like I was the only person in the room. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. They had 6 weeks. I had everything I needed. And for the first time since the night I walked in on them, I felt something close to calm. Kind of calm that comes right before the ground gives way under someone else's feet. I didn't know yet how completely the secret would unravel when the moment came. I only knew that when Ashley walked down the aisle in front of 200 people who still believed she was the golden daughter, I would be ready. And she would never see it coming. The weeks that followed moved with a strange double rhythm. On the surface, life continued in the ordinary way people expect after a broken engagement. I went back to work. I answered polite questions from coworkers with a short practice sentence. Things didn't work out. Most of them nodded and changed the subject. A few pressed harder. I gave them nothing. Underneath, every day was measured and deliberate. I kept the envelope locked away, but I added to it quietly, carefully. I spoke to 2 former coworkers of Ashley's from a job. She had left 3 years earlier under vague circumstances. One of them, a woman named Rachel who now lived in Cincinnati, agreed to meet me for coffee on a Saturday morning. She arrived late, ordered black coffee, and spent the first 10 minutes studying my face like she was deciding whether I could be trusted. I always wondered if someone from her family would come asking, she said finally. I kept my voice even. I'm not here to make trouble for you. I just need to know if what I found is real. Rachel looked out the window for a long time. Then she told me what she knew. Ashley had taken a medical leave that stretched longer than anyone expected. There had been rumors. A sudden trip out of state. A change in her personality when she returned. Sharper, more guarded, quick to shut down certain conversations. Rachel had once walked in on Ashley crying in the break room and gotten only a hard stare in return. She made it clear that if anyone repeated anything, she'd find a way to make their life difficult, Rachel said. I believed her. I thanked her and left a 20 on the table for both coffees. In the car, I sat with the engine off for several minutes, letting the new pieces settle into place. Everything matched the papers I already had. The timeline held. The secret was solid. I did not celebrate. I simply drove home and added Rachel's name and number to a small notebook I kept in the fireproof box. Finn tried to reach me twice more through mutual friends. Both times the message was the same. He was sorry he never meant for it to happen this way. He hoped I could find peace. I deleted the messages without reply. Peace was not what I was looking for. Ashley was more aggressive. She showed up at my apartment one evening without warning. I opened the door only as far as the chain would allow. She looked polished, as always. Soft sweater, careful makeup, the expression of someone who had practiced being misunderstood. We need to talk, she said. We don't. Claire, this is ridiculous. You're acting like I murdered someone. I almost smiled. You didn't murder anyone. You just took what wasn't yours and then rewrote the story so you looked like the victim. Her jaw tightened. Ethan and I have a real connection. You two were already falling apart. Everyone could see it. Everyone except me, I said. And the people who watched you help me plan the wedding while you were sleeping with him. She flinched at that, just slightly. Then the mask slipped back into place. Mom and Dad are worried about you. You're isolating yourself. It's not healthy. I'm fine. You're not. You're bitter. And if you try to cause problems at the wedding, I closed the door. I heard her stand there for almost a full minute before her footsteps finally moved away down the hall. That night I slept without dreams. My parents, however, did not give up. My mother called 3 times the following week. On the third call, I answered. Claire, this has gone on long enough, she said. Ashley is getting married in 3 weeks. Family needs to be there for each other. I'm not going. You are her sister. She stopped being my sister the night I found her with my fiancé. My mother's voice softened into the tone she had always used when she wanted me to be the reasonable one. People make mistakes. Ashley feels terrible. She's been crying to me every day. Ethan feels terrible too. They never wanted to hurt you. I stared at the wall of my kitchen. Did she tell you what she did 3 years ago? Silence. Claire, what are you talking about? Ask her, I said and hung up. I knew my mother would call Ashley within the hour. I also knew Ashley would have a smooth, incomplete answer ready. That was fine. I wasn't trying to convince my mother yet. I was simply planting the first small crack. 2 days later, my father called. His voice was quieter than my mother's, heavier. Your sister says you're spreading lies about her, he said. I'm not spreading anything. Then what did you mean on the phone with your mother? I considered telling him everything right then. Papers. Clinic. The years of careful silence. Instead, I said, when she's ready to tell the truth, she will. Until then, I'm staying away. He was quiet for a long time. I don't like what's happening to this family. Neither do I answered. But I didn't start it. After that call, I sat at my table and opened the notebook again. The wedding was now 17 days away. I had confirmed the venue, the time, the approximate guest list through the same mutual friend who had first sent the invitation screenshot. 200 people. Many of them shared friends. Some of them had been at the engagement party Ethan and I hosted the previous spring. They would remember my face. I began drafting the final version of what I would say. Not a speech. Not a scene. Something quieter and more precise. Words that could not be dismissed as jealousy or hysteria. Words backed by documents that could not be argued away in the moment. I practiced them out loud in my apartment until they felt natural in my mouth. Meanwhile, life around Ashley and Ethan continued in the bright, public way they preferred. I saw photos online, never directly, only through people who still thought I needed updates. Engagement. Party number 2. Cake tasting. Ashley in a white dress that was not a wedding dress but close enough. Ethan looking at her the way he used to look at me. I stopped letting people send me those things. The less I saw, the clearer my mind stayed. 10 days before the wedding, something unexpected happened. I received a message from a number I didn't recognize. It was short. I know what Ashley did 3 years ago. If you're the sister, we should talk. I stared at the screen for a full minute before replying. Who is this? The answer came quickly. A name I didn't know, Megan Clark, and a request to meet in a public place the next afternoon. I chose a busy cafe near the university, somewhere with cameras and plenty of exits. I arrived early and took a seat facing the door. Megan was in her early 30s, practical clothes, no-nonsense expression. She sat down without smiling. I worked at the clinic, she said. Not as medical staff. Front desk and records. Ashley Thompson came through during a time when things were sensitive. She paid cash. She used a different last name on some of the paperwork. But people talk, and I have a good memory for faces. I kept my hands still on the table. Why are you contacting me now? Because I saw the wedding announcement. And because I never liked how she handled herself while she was there. She treated the staff like they were disposable. When I realized who she was marrying, I looked up the family. Your name came up in older posts. Engagement photos. It wasn't hard to put together. She slid a folded piece of paper across the table. I didn't open it in front of her. I'm not looking for money, Megan said. I'm not looking to be involved past this. But if you're planning to do something with the truth that might help, I thanked her. We didn't speak again after that. When she left, I waited 5 full minutes before standing up. In the car, I opened the paper. It was a copy of an intake form with Ashley's handwriting, and a date that matched everything I already had. Another brick in the wall. That night I added it to the box. Final week arrived with a different kind of pressure. My mother showed up at my apartment unannounced. I let her in because refusing would have created more noise than I wanted. She looked tired. Ashley is devastated that you won't come. She wants her sister there. She wants the picture of a perfect family, I said. Not her sister. Claire, please. Whatever happened between you two, this is still a wedding. People will notice if you're not there. I looked at her for a long moment. Would you have said the same thing if it had been me marrying the man she was engaged to? My mother's mouth opened, then closed. She didn't answer. I walked her to the door. I'm not coming as a guest, Mom. That's all you need to know. After she left, I stood in the quiet of the apartment and felt the last of the old loyalty drain away. There was no version of this family that could be put back together the way it had been. That truth no longer hurt the way it once had. Simply existed. 3 days before the wedding, I drove to the venue, not to cause a scene, only to see the layout. The building was an old, restored manor house with a long driveway, wide front steps, and a reception hall that opened onto a terrace. I walked the grounds like any curious visitor. I noted the places where people would gather, the side doors, the flow from ceremony to cocktail hour. I did not speak to anyone on staff. I simply looked, memorized, and left. That evening I took the envelope and the notebook out one final time. I arranged every document in the order I would need it. I checked the dates. I checked the names. I checked the small details that would make denial impossible in front of a room full of people. Then I put everything back into the box and locked it. Outside, the Ohio sky was clear and cold. Somewhere across the city, Ashley was probably having her final dress fitting, or practicing her vows. Ethan was probably telling himself that what they had done was complicated but inevitable, that real love had simply arrived at an inconvenient time. They believed the hard part was already over. They believed I had disappeared into quiet bitterness the way people like me were supposed to. They were wrong on both counts. I turned off the lights in the apartment and stood at the window for a long time, watching the street below. The wedding was in 3 days. 200 guests. Perfect setting. Perfect moment when I would be on the bride. I had waited through the shock, through the grief, through the slow gathering of every necessary piece. Now there was only the final stretch of silence before the truth stepped into the light. And when it did, Ashley would finally understand what it cost to take something that never belonged to her. The morning of the wedding arrived under a clear November sky. I woke early, showered, and dressed with the same care I would have given my own wedding day. Simple black dress, low heels, hair pulled back cleanly. No statement. No drama in the clothing. Just the quiet appearance of someone who belonged in the room long enough to be heard. I placed the fireproof box on the passenger seat of my car and drove. The manor house looked exactly as it had when I walked the grounds days earlier. White chairs already formed neat rows on the lawn. String lights hung in careful loops across the terrace. Staff moved with the focused energy of people who had done this many times. Guests had begun to arrive, couples in formal clothes, older relatives, friends I recognized from years of overlapping lives. I parked at the far edge of the lot and waited. My phone stayed silent. No one expected me. That was the point. 2:40 I stepped out of the car, took the envelope from the box, and walked toward the side entrance that led into the main reception hall. A staff member glanced at me, then at the envelope in my hand, and assumed I was a late vendor or a family friend carrying something important. I gave a small nod and kept moving. Inside, the ceremony space was already filling. Soft music played. The air smelled of flowers and polished wood. I found a place near the back wall, half-shadowed by a tall arrangement of white roses, and watched. Ashley appeared at the end of the aisle 12 minutes later. She looked beautiful in the way she had always known how to look beautiful. Fitted ivory gown, hair in soft waves, expression carefully composed into something that suggested both joy and humility. Ethan stood at the front in a dark suit, hands clasped, smiling the same smile he had once given me. My parents sat in the front row on the bride's side. My mother's shoulders were already shaking with happy tears. I felt nothing that resembled longing, only a deep, steady clarity. The ceremony began. Vows were spoken. Rings were exchanged. When the officiant pronounced them married, the room erupted in applause and the sound of people rising to their feet. Ashley and Ethan kissed. Cameras flashed. The recessional music swelled. I waited until the last of the guests had filtered toward the cocktail terrace before I moved. The reception hall had been transformed. Long tables, low candles, place cards, and elegant script. I walked the perimeter, once noting the head table, the dance floor, the small raised platform where speeches would later be given. Then I found a quiet corner near the entrance and stood with the envelope held loosely at my side. People began to notice me. A former coworker from Ethan's firm saw me first. Her eyes widened. She leaned toward the person beside her. Within minutes, a low current of recognition moved through the early arrivals. I did not smile or wave. I simply remained where I was. My mother spotted me as she entered on my father's arm. Color drained from her face. She crossed the room quickly. "Claire, what are you doing here?" "I came to offer my congratulations," I said. Her voice dropped. "You need to leave. This is Ashley's day. I won't stay long." My father placed a hand on my mother's shoulder. He looked at me with something closer to resignation than anger. "Don't make a scene." "I don't plan to," I answered. Ashley and Ethan entered the hall to another round of applause. They moved through the crowd accepting hugs and handshakes, glowing in the way newly married people are supposed to glow. Took nearly 10 minutes before Ashley's eyes found me. The smile on her face froze, then carefully rearranged itself into something colder. She excused herself from a group of guests and walked toward me with Ethan a half step behind. "You weren't invited," she said under her breath. "I know." "Then leave." I met her eyes. "I brought something for you. A wedding gift of sorts." Ethan looked between us, tension already tightening his jaw. "Claire, please." "Not today." Ashley's voice stayed low, but the edge was sharp. "If you came here to cause a problem in front of our guests—" "I came to tell the truth," I said. "In front of the people who still believe the version you've been selling." A few nearby guests had gone quiet, sensing the shift. Ashley noticed. She forced a bright smile and turned slightly so that anyone watching would see only a private family conversation. "You're jealous," she said softly. You've always been jealous. This is pathetic. I opened the envelope. The first page I removed was the photograph of Ashley outside the clinic. I held it so only she and Ethan could see it. Clearly, Ashley's face changed. Polished control cracked for half a second, eyes widening, breath catching before she tried to recover. That doesn't mean anything. I removed the second page. The intake form with her handwriting. Then the printed emails. Then the bank records showing the cash payments that matched the dates. Ethan's face had gone pale. He stared at the papers as if they might rearrange themselves into something less damning. Ashley reached for them. I stepped back just enough to keep them out of range. 3 years ago, I said, still quiet, still calm, you left the state for what you told everyone was a work trip. You paid cash. You used a different name on some of the forms. You came back different, sharper, more careful, and you made sure no one in the family ever asked the right questions. Her voice was barely a whisper. You have no right. I have every right. You stood in my living room and took the man I was going to marry. You told our parents I was the unstable one. You planned this wedding while I was still returning gifts and canceling vendors. You don't get to keep the secret and the happy ending. The circle of quiet around us had grown. Guess we're turning. My mother had moved closer, face tight with confusion and rising alarm. Ashley tried one last time. This is private. You can't just. I raised my voice only enough to carry to the people nearest us. Not a shout. Clear, steady tone that cut through the soft background music. My sister has been lying to this family for 3 years about a medical procedure she went out of state to have in secret. She paid in cash, used a false name on records, and threatened people who worked there if they ever spoke about it. She did all of that while continuing to play the perfect daughter. And 4 months before she married the man who was engaged to me, she was already sleeping with him in the house we shared. The room had gone completely still. Ashley's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I placed the papers on the nearest table, neatly where anyone who wanted to look could see the dates and the signatures. I'm not here to ruin your marriage, I said, still looking only at her. I'm here so that the people who have spent years believing your version of events finally have the full one. What they do with it is up to them. I turned and walked toward the exit. Behind me, the silence broke into overlapping voices, questions, gasps, someone calling Ashley's name, my mother's sharp cry of disbelief. I did not look back. Outside, the late afternoon air was cold and clean. I walked to my car without hurry, placed the empty envelope on the passenger seat, and started the engine. I drove for 20 minutes before I pulled over in an empty church parking lot and simply sat. My hands were steady on the wheel. Pressure that had lived in my chest for months had loosened, not into triumph exactly, but into something quieter and more complete. My phone began to vibrate. Messages. Missed. Calls. I turned it face down and left it that way. That night I slept in my own bed for the first time in weeks without the low hum of unfinished business running beneath every thought. In the days that followed, the fallout arrived. In pieces. My mother called once, voice raw, asking how I could have done that to my own sister on her wedding day. I listened without defending myself and ended the call when she began to cry. My father sent a short text 2 days later. I don't agree with how you handled it, but I understand why. It was the closest thing to support I would receive from them, and I accepted it as enough. Ethan tried to reach me through a mutual friend. The message was brief and stripped of the earlier justifications. He hadn't known. He felt sick. He was sorry for everything. I did not reply. Ashley went silent. The marriage lasted 4 months. I learned that from the same friend who had once sent the invitation screenshot. There was no dramatic public announcement, only the quiet removal of joint photos and the eventual confirmation that Ethan had moved out. Whether the secret itself had ended things or simply exposed the foundation that was never solid, I didn't know and no longer needed to. I did not celebrate. I simply continued. 6 months after the wedding, I took a new position in a different city 2 hours away. The apartment I found was smaller than the one I had shared with Ethan, but the light was better and the silence belonged only to me. I unpacked slowly. I hung the few photographs that still mattered. I bought new dishes that had never been part of a registry. On a quiet Sunday morning, I sat at the small table by the window with coffee and the notebook I had once used to organize every careful step. Most of the pages were blank now. I turned to the last one that still held writing, the final version of the words I had spoken in the reception hall, and read them once more. Then I closed the notebook and placed it in a drawer. The anger had done its work. Truth had been delivered in the only place and time that could not be ignored. What remained was ordinary life, the kind that does not require an audience or a perfect ending, only the steady decision to keep moving forward without the weight of someone else's lies. I finished my coffee, rinsed the cup, and opened the window to let the morning air in. Somewhere behind me, the past still existed. Ashley, Ethan, the manor house, the moment the room went silent. But it no longer sat in the center of everything. It had become a chapter one had written all the way to its last page and then closed. I was ready for whatever came next.